What's up, YouTube? This is Bullshifter, and today I wanted to do a little bit of a different video than what I'm accustomed to doing. Typically, I make a lot of Path of Exile videos, some retro game videos. Most of my stuff is tutorial-based, a lot of game guides. But today, I kind of just wanted to shoot on a subject in gaming that's kind of been making more and more headlines as time has gone by, and something that I feel is just a really solid topic to talk about. What that subject is, and this does pertain to Path of Exile and unfortunately pretty much every single game that I play on PS4, and that is microtransactions and post-launch monetization of video games. So the reason I wanted to bring this up, lately in the news there's been a large thing about a game called Apex Legends. They have a new event going on where they kind of did something shady between expensive loot boxes that cost $7 a piece for a completely randomized item, along with not being able to unlock an item that many people want until you actually buy enough loot boxes to have every single item from the event loot boxes, on top of paying for the item individually. So basically it's a $170 item. So I just kind of wanted to draw some attention to the different microtransactions and the different monetization methods in games, and kind of get a discussion going on, is this the right way for these companies to go? Now, Path of Exile, let's use Path of Exile as our first example. They make a majority of their money off of stash tabs and just different cosmetic pieces that you can add to your armor that literally just changes the piece of armor's appearance. Now, a good way to gauge how much these things cost in Path of Exile is by going to the price of points, which is typically $10 per 100 points. So basically you put a 0 at the end of the price of an item, and that's going to be your price. Right now they have a sale going on currency stash tabs, which in all reality, they can be a little pricey, I'm not going to lie. But it's functional. It's a functional part of a free game. So I personally don't mind it that much. Other people do. That's based off of opinion. I guess kind of where my issue lies when it comes to a free-to-play game with Path of Exile is how much are charged for some of these cosmetic items. So right here, for example, these two items right here, this is a $46 piece of wings. And this is $64, which is more than a fully fledged AAA title that you can buy brand new, day of launch. Why is that an issue? What you're getting for the amount of money that you're paying, it's not really fair. Now, this is my opinion, and I'm sure there's a ton of people who agree with me, and there may be some who don't, but for me, this is not a good value. Other games do this as well, and they charge even less of an amount for things that I also don't necessarily believe are worth it. A couple of other free-to-play games, as I mentioned, Apex Legends already, and Fortnite, they will charge for individual skins. And what they charge for most of those individual skins typically ranges between the $15 to $20 range. You may occasionally see ones that are a little cheaper, and possibly ones that are more expensive. I haven't logged into Fortnite in a very long time. I do play Apex somewhat regularly, but I would say between the $15 to $20 range per costume or per skin is pretty much on the average. Now, we have to keep in mind that this is literally just for something that makes you look different in a game. Now, I get it. This is their way of monetizing things. However, these little individual a la carte items, I don't believe should cost this much. And I think a lot of this comes from the mobile gaming boom of all of these mobile games being free, and then people essentially price gouging for different individual items. A lot of them being kind of loot box oriented. Now, I'll give Fortnite a little bit of credit. They don't really have loot boxes, at least the last time I knew they didn't do loot boxes. Loot boxes have kind of been viewed as a dirty word in the gaming industry. Admittedly, Path of Exile does have loot boxes that are $3 a piece that you can get a random piece of gear from. Now, loot boxes do seem to vary in price between games. Like I said, the current Apex Legends loot packs cost $7 per box. You can get some pretty cool items from them, but the problem is these things are all randomized. A lot of games, Overwatch, still doing loot boxes. The big controversy from loot boxes originally came from Star Wars Battlefront 2, where they were actually locking character skill cards in the loot boxes themselves. There was a huge outrage, and this is kind of what really brought the loot box problem to light was Star Wars Battlefront 2. Their sales tanked. The game struggled. You can pretty much find a copy of the game for under $10 on a pretty regular basis when it's on sale. And the sad thing is the developers of that game actually made kind of a good game, but it was totally ruined by the publisher's decision, EA's decision, to throw all of these items into loot boxes and essentially price gouge their customers. Now, in free-to-play games, I understand that they do have to make their revenue from somewhere, but free-to-play games will do something that's called appealing to the whales, and that's where things like these back attachments come into play. There are people with a lot of disposable income who have no problem throwing $64 down on a pair of Transcendence wings for their character. They don't care. They have the money to do it. All the more power to those people. I am not ragging on you. Congratulations for, doing so well with yourself to where you have that kind of disposable income. All I'm saying is, it's not consumer friendly for your average consumer. I personally believe that games like this, the free-to-play games that are charging for these individual items as microtransactions, should have more of an appeal to the average gamer, and that the price point should therefore match the average gamer. If 5 million people play your game, obviously, you have to pay for the servers, you had to pay for the development costs, you had to pay for any marketing that you did, you have to pay for the building, the equipment you use. There's a lot of expenses that go into creating a game. It can range anywhere from a couple of $1 million for some of the smaller indie developers to, $100 million, or some games have even gone to $200 million. But one thing you do have to factor in is typically if you've paid over $100 million in development costs for your game, you are a large AAA studio who is probably going to sell a few $1 million or a few million copies worth of your game. If you haven't, then honestly you probably made a bad game, or you didn't market very well, and you kind of failed with your money along the way. And with as large as those teams are, you really don't have anyone to blame but yourself for those types of situations. However, I kind of digress from the point here. The point is, it doesn't take selling a bunch of $64 wings, or $27, $50 wings, or $20 costumes, or $15 costumes in order for these companies to not only make their money back, but to profit. A game like Fortnite has made an insane amount of money. I don't have an exact figure, but we've all read the reports. We've all seen what kind of money that game has racked in. And typically they've just made a few map changes, thrown in some more cosmetics, balanced the game, and paid for their servers. They have a relatively large development team, but odds are it probably hasn't cost them $200 million to make their game. But they have definitely made that amount of money back. Now, I wouldn't be so much against this if a lot of this money went back to the game developers who worked on the game themselves. However, it doesn't. It goes to the publishers, it goes to the heads, it goes to the guys who are in charge, not to the guys who actually put in the work to create these items. I guarantee you that the person who made these back attachments doesn't see any kind of bonus money from their back attachments selling for a ridiculous amount of money. Instead, they get their base salary and they go home and they try to live their lives just like you and I. The average game developer there's quite a few different figures online, but it's anywhere between 50 to upwards of over $100,000 a year. And they can make less than that. Some game testers only make between $14 to $15 an hour. So a lot of these people who are working in the games industry are making about as much money as you and I. It's not them who's seeing the benefit from all these extra profits. It's the people at the publishing company. It's those bigwigs at EA, at Activision. It's not the guy who's a little peon creating textures or character models for BioWare. He's not seeing all that extra money. All that extra money is going to the pockets of these guys who run these publishing companies. So I do want to point out that there is a huge difference between developer and publisher, unless they're one and the same, which typically they are not. Indie companies, yes. Indie companies, the developer typically also publishes the game. But for a lot of your AAA titles, which is more or less what we're talking about here, the developers are typically owned by a larger publisher. For example, Star Wars Battlefront 2, developed by DICE, published by EA. The guys at DICE typically aren't seeing any extra money for the DLC or the loot boxes or anything else that's sold with the game. That's being seen by EA. That's being seen by the big head honchos sitting up in their giant offices, raking in the dough. So kind of when you have these feelings of, they shouldn't be doing this, I'd be very reserved to point that at the developers, because it's typically the publishers who are deciding on this type of thing. So, keep in mind the difference between the two. Now, we've kind of talked about the free-to-play model and, how money affects that. However, I think my bigger issue here are your AAA titles. So, your Call of Duties, your Crash Team Racing, games like that, to where I had to pay between $40 to $60 to purchase the game in the first place. And then on top of that, they want me to spend more money on their cosmetic items. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is a great example. So that game in their first 3 days sold over $500 million worth of units. In the first 3 days. I believe from some articles that I saw online that they had a profit of about 400% off of that game. Just the game alone, between, their game with the Black Ops pass that came out initially and people just buying the base game of Call of Duty Black Ops. So I do have to ask, if you've had a 400% profit line from that game and you're literally just going to rinse and repeat and make another game the next year, why in the hell are you charging extra for cosmetic items except for to essentially gouge your player base, to gouge gamers of more money? Some people will stand up against this and say, no, I'm not going to purchase those things. That's not something I'm going to do. However, we're all guilty of it. We've all purchased some sort of item from these games at some point or another. I picked up essentially a Founders Pack for Path of Exile, mostly purchased some stash tabs, but also purchased a couple of random boxes just to see if I could get some random cosmetics. I did it for this game. It was my choice. I wanted to throw $60 the developer's way, essentially like paying for a full AAA game in order to support the game. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're a bad person if you purchase these things. You're not. It's not your fault. The only problem here is that we're being conditioned that these things are okay for the publishers to do to us. We're telling them it's okay, essentially, to charge us $15 to $20 for a costume, or, anywhere between $30 to $60 for just a piece of gear appearance. And it's kind of outrageous. Lately, I've been playing a bit more on my PS2. And the beauty behind playing my PS2 is the fact that I've been playing all these games where all the extra cosmetic items, all these extra cool things that you can get in the game, you have to earn. I remember back when I played Halo Online on the Xbox 360. I think it was Halo 3 that had the really cool samurai-looking armor. You actually had to earn that armor through in-game achievements. And when people saw people with that armor online, you'd go, oh crap, I bet you this person's really good at the game. And typically they were, because they had to be good at the game. They had to earn what they had. And we just don't do that anymore. Now we just shell out money and we pay for the things that we have in these games, which is really unfortunate. And the worst part about that is there are a lot of kids playing these games. Now, I'm not going to say that kids playing games is bad. That's when I started playing games. It's when almost all of us started playing games, is when we were kids. However, when we were kids, we weren't living in this predatory game publisher time where they were trying to gouge us for any sort of money that we earned, or try and, get us to spend our parents' money on individual costumes. We were buying games because games were fun and games were great, and that's all we were paying for up front was the game. As we got a little bit older, once we got out of that PS2, original Xbox, and, GameCube era and got into the next era of gaming, the PS3, the Xbox 360, the Wii, we'd pay for some DLC content, which would give us some awesome maps or some other stuff within the game. But we typically weren't being charged for cosmetics, not at least until the end of that era. This kind of all picked up with the PS4 and the Xbox One. Not so much the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo's kind of dabbled in microtransactions a bit, but to their credit, they haven't really gone full-fledged with it like a lot of other companies have. Pokemon Go, obviously, is somewhat from Nintendo, being a Pokemon game and all. There's microtransactions, and Fire Emblem Heroes on mobile. But the thing is, those are also mobile games. And mobile games have been infamous for this basically since the start of mobile games. Like, that's one of the things we all know about mobile games, is they're free and there's a ton of microtransactions. When it comes to Nintendo's full-fledged titles, they still do pretty much DLC packs, character packs, map packs, things with additional story. They're kind of doing what we did last gen, but in a good way this time. Nintendo's typically behind on a lot of stuff, but this is one thing I'm glad they're behind on. I'm glad they don't jump into what we're currently seeing with games like Fortnite, Apex, Crash Team Racing, Call of Duty, Madden, any sports game ever right now, where we're paying for, card packs or loot boxes or cosmetic items. I would much rather spend $15 to $20 on a map pack that gives me a bunch more game time in a game that I really enjoy, that gives me a different environment to play in, that gives me a new experience that's just going to prolong how long I play that game. Games now are so turn and burn. You finish the game and you're done with it, you know, unless it's a competitive game. And then if you play a competitive game, a lot of the times you're being gouged to look different than the average player because you don't want to look like everyone else. Well, everyone buys that costume and you go, oh crap, everyone's wearing this costume, now I have to buy another costume. And it's just this long slippery slope that we just keep slipping down. And the problem with kids who are being introduced to this now is they're being conditioned. They're being conditioned to believe that this is the norm. It's normal to play a game for free, but then to dish out $20 every couple of weeks for a new costume, and then see a couple of years down the road what you spent on one game. And that's scary, because the game industry, these publishers are just going to see the amount of money that they can get, and they're going to keep pushing the limits until they get pushback, like they did on Star Wars Battlefront 2, or like Apex Legends has gotten recently. They are never going to admit to a pricing mistake or using predatory tactics unless they're called out. And if they're not called out, they're going to push even harder next time to see how much money they can make next time. I'm not trying to throw any specific games or developers or anything under the bus. I just think that this is a conversation that we need to have as gamers so that we're not continuing to see a less and less consumer-friendly market. I, for one, personally would rather pay more for games up front in order to have all of the content available to me. That's one argument that a lot of publishers and developers will use, is that, you know, games have been between $50 to $60 for AAA titles for a really long time now. Inflation has occurred. We have to pay people more. Things are more expensive. It just doesn't cover the costs anymore. That's arguable. You could say for companies that are selling 10 million copies of their game that they are definitely still being very, very profitable. However, if that's the case, I would rather pay $80 to $100 for a game up front and have everything available to me. Have it so that I can have those fun days of feeling that sense of achievement from actually unlocking something in a game. Unlocking a new costume, like in the original Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, or even like in the current one. You know, unlocking different armor pieces like in Halo. You know, there's just so many great examples of playing games in the past, what are considered retro games now, where you earned what you had in the game. Playing God of War, you get different armors for Kratos based off of things that you did while finishing the game. Just a lot of really cool stuff like that that gave you a sense of accomplishment and just didn't reach into your wallet and pull out money and say, if you want to look like this, you owe me $20. That's just not right, and it's something that we kind of need to stand up as gamers against. I'd rather see the upfront cost increase, or the other thing that you can do, keep your base game at $60, let people pick, you know, items a la carte. I think you should lower the price on them, but let them purchase individual things. Then have another tier. Have, you know, an $80 or $100 version of that game where you get all of the different characters and maps and everything else, all the actual physical in-game content that actually makes a difference for a little bit of a higher cost, instead of purchasing individual, you know, DLC packs or cosmetics. And then if you want all these cosmetics, or you're a game that plans on making a ton of cosmetics, make another tier higher than that. That's $150 or hell, $200 if you plan on making a bunch of cosmetics over the next few years, to where those players are guaranteed to get all of those cosmetic items throughout time. You know, if there's a player that's really dedicated to your game and really loves your game, wouldn't you want to reward those people, give them the opportunity to spend that much more to show their support and just get everything and not feel like they're being gouged? If there's someone who really likes that game and who would have been willing to spend, you know, $5 to $10 per costume or whatever it may be, if they feel good about spending that $200 and you provide them with that content and that service and they continue to play your game and they're loyal to your game, isn't that better to have than all of this news controversy, all this controversy over loot boxes and how you're price gouging people? Doesn't that seem like a great solution to what's going on right now in the games industry? Stories are popping up like this all of the time. People are feeling price gouged. People are feeling cheated. People are feeling like game publishers are being greedy, and that's in large part because a lot of them are. EA has a terrible reputation. Activision has a terrible reputation. And all these things that they do, like releasing Crash Team Racing or Call of Duty without any microtransactions at release, getting their good reviews, and then turning around and throw microtransactions into the game. It's dirty. It feels dirty. It feels like we're being done wrong. You know, I should be able to play up front for this game and earn the things that I want to earn in that game. Now, a lot of people praise battle passes, and battle passes are cool for the amount of content that they can give you for a a small amount of money. The average battle pass typically goes for like $9 to $10. You go and you play through, you do a bunch of challenges or play the game a lot, and you can unlock a bunch of stuff. Now that's cool in one aspect, in the fact that you're paying a pretty small amount. You usually earn your currency right back, and you get a lot of really cool looking items in the process. The only thing that sucks about that is then you somewhat become a slave to that game. You know, you're stuck kind of playing for those few months while that's going on in order to gain all those items, and if you don't, then you lose out on that value. So I'm going to kind of end the video here, just because I feel like I've kind of ranted enough on the subject. I do want to hear your opinions in the comments section below. The only thing I ask is obviously be respectful of everyone's opinions. Don't flame anyone. Don't, criticize anyone for their opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So, just be respectful of one another. But I would like to see what you guys think on the subject. I've kind of given my long-winded opinion on here. So definitely go ahead and start the conversation down in the comments section below. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thanks again for watching this video and for being a part of the channel. If you liked this video or have liked any of my videos in the past, definitely feel free to subscribe, tell your friends about the channel as well. If you liked this video and kind of agree with the message of it, definitely shoot a like up there. And until next time, may the RNG be with you, always.